How's it going? I'm Ryan. Today I'm going to go over a few trades I took on ES and the one trade that I took on NQ. Had a couple losers to start the day on ES. Had a winner to end the day on NQ. Was able to make the majority of my losses back. End up slightly red with a very small loss overall in the day. So kind of a lesson in managing losses. Maybe a lesson in there in terms of having too tight of a stop loss. But having generally bigger winners than losers. So even though I lost the majority of my trades today, still a very small red day overall. But let's take a look at some of the levels I was watching, some of the things I was watching coming into today. Take a look here. So yesterday we had a massive sell-off. We had yesterday's high and low marked. I'm not going to go over every single zone here, but we'll look at a few that came into play. So look, we have a zone from 501 or 5,122 to 5,125 ish. That yesterday low a day, and then this zone down here around like 5,087 to 5,090 or so. What I was watching is we had this massive sell-off. Things kind of slowed down, right? That momentum to the downside kind of slowed down. You see these smaller candles on the hourly we're looking at here. Then we start to get these longer wicks, and we kind of hold this zone down in here. This zone kind of held throughout today as well. You can see that aftermarket or after hours low kind of held until we slightly broke it here. But generally we were within a range. You know, the high of the pre-market similar to the high of the day, low of that pre-market similar to the low of the day as well. So kind of a rangy day. Coming into the day, we sold off, kind of tested this area, came down. I was considering a call in here because we had, previously bounced once, twice, three, four. We had a couple times in the pre-market leading up to this, and this is a zone that I was watching where we had bounces in this area. I'll look at the 1 minute chart here in a second, but it was considering a call here. Didn't really love it, so I didn't take it. But it moved. It really moved out of that area well over almost 20 points or so from the low of that. So we'll take a look at the 1 minute and we'll see why I was considering taking a call there, as well as why I did not. So we came down and we held, so we wicked into this area, closed above it, came down, made a lower low, but closed within this zone. And then when I saw this candle, I didn't like this. Ideally, I would have liked to see us push down and hold and close strong, but instead we kind of got the opposite, right? We pushed up and then closed weak, just barely green on that. So that didn't give me the confidence that I needed to take a long position here, especially because we had been seeing this weakness. From there, though, we did get a nice bounce and a nice move out of that area. It could have been a nice entry to take calls off the retest and hold of yesterday's low, especially because we got a little bounce here off that, like a 6-8 point move off of that. Once we broke above it with some momentum and then held it for multiple 1 minute candles forming, hammers, wouldn't have been a bad entry as well to capitalize on a piece of that move. So kind of missed out there. We'll go back to the 5 minute and we'll take a look. But with that being said, we pushed up, dropped right back down, kind of chopped around. A lot of this wasn't very interesting to me, as it was pretty choppy and pretty rangy. We had a lot of volatility, but we didn't have a trend. So I wasn't quite interested, and things were kind of moving really, really quick. And so I wasn't dying to jump into a trade necessarily. I did take 2 trades in here, the same trade twice, so kind of silly, but let's take a look at that. So on this candle here, I took a short position. The reason why I did that is because we were coming up and testing this area that we had held as support. So we had this wick in this area that we bounced off of. We also kind of had this support in here that we had broken and formed a new low. We had these wicks up into this area before we pushed lower. So as we were coming up and testing kind of this general, this general zone, I took a short entry and was stopped out after, when we pushed up a little bit. So we'll take a look at the 1 minute, and I'll show you exactly where my stop loss and take profits were going to be. So this was on, I believe, in here on this candle. So my stop loss was above these wicks in here, so kind of like this wick and these series of wicks. So it was about like 591.5 or so, somewhere in here. And this candle stopped me out. So we pushed up, this following candle stopped me out. So that was my first trade of the day and my first loss. Now, what did I do wrong? I want to back this out to the 5 minute here. Let's take a look. What would have been a better entry? A better entry would have been a retest of this yesterday's low a day, right? I didn't have a level here that I was watching necessarily. And if we look at the price action, we held this once, twice, almost three, 3 times, almost 4. So waiting for price to wick up into this area where we had this support, just being a slightly, more patient, as well as if you're looking at a downtrend or an uptrend and you're looking at either a lower high or a higher low, generally when you get a big move like this and you start to bounce, you're not going to bounce like 2 points and immediately keep going, right? If you get that lower high, you need to let that buying kind of come up and then stop out, right? Or come up and kind of pewter out. So waiting for the retest of yesterday's low would have been a better entry. And we did get a really nice rejection, about a 10-point rejection off that. So that would have been a much better entry had I just been a little bit more patient and waited for a retest of a better level than in here. So that was my first trade and small loss. Where was I? I guess I'll talk about my take profit had it gotten there. My take profit, I was aiming for low a day. So I wanted to, I entered 2 contracts. I was aiming for low a day. I entered somewhere in here. I probably would have trimmed one before low a day and then set my take profit to low a day. So I had about, a 3-to-1 risk to reward. If we look at where I stopped out, somewhere in here, about a 2-point stop for, what would that be? Almost an 8-point if we looked at the full move down to low a day. So maybe around a little over 3-to-1. My second trade of the day was this right here. I was watching, and I believe it'll make a little bit more clear if we look at the 1 minute chart here. So I had plotted this out where we had, right there. So once we did reject off that previous low a day, we came down and we started to make what I was seeing as a bit of a bear flag, right? We had this big move down. We kind of flag up. I was waiting for the break and continuation. When we broke under, I took a short position as we retested. So what went wrong here? Well, I think what went obviously wrong is you can see these candles here don't have a lot of momentum to the downside, even though we broke out of that trend line and we got that close on both the 5 minute and the 1 minute. So if I back this up to the 5 minute, we opened below this trend line. Wasn't the greatest, right? It could have been much cleaner. I think maybe this was an instance of me getting a little bit too caught up on the 1 minute, but we had these lower wicks and we weren't getting a lot of follow through on this. So when we retested and we dropped, I had about like a 3-point move. I trimmed a single contract. I took 3 contracts here. Trimmed a single one when we came down here because we'd bounced once and twice before on these 2 candles. Trimmed one around 5,086 and left my 2 remaining contracts once again looking for that low a day. My stop loss was above 592. I think I gave it like an extra 0.5 point, so just slightly above these wicks here. We pushed up and stopped me out. I probably could have had a tighter stop loss here because these signs were a little telling, and then once we broke up on this candle, I wanted to give it a little wiggle room because we'd been kind of rejecting off these areas, sitting a little bit lower highs, but nonetheless, probably could have had a slightly tighter stop and minimize some of that loss. But this candle here stopped me out on my remaining 2 contracts. So I had a small profit and then a loss that wiped that out. So first loss was here, second loss was here. I do want to say that neither of these trades were great. Neither of these trades were very good at all. I think having sat out and watched the majority of these moves happen, I may have been a little too eager to take a trade, and especially kind of re-entering a trade that didn't work, right? I should have been a bit more patient on my first trade. And then the second trade, there wasn't really much there. We did have a little bit of a flag, right? Had we actually gotten some actual breakthrough to the downside, that would have been a legitimate play to look for continuation. But that wasn't really there. My third trade was so that was it for me on the day. I logged off at that point. I came back later in the day and I drew this trend line. And it was around here that I came back. So we had this pre-market rejection, we had these swing highs. So I drew the line, this trend line between, those three swing highs. I entered short position when we came up and retested here. I got stopped out. So I should have probably set my stop a little bit above 5,108. That was pretty much at the very top of that wick. But we came up and we wicked. I did not like this close on the 5 minute here, although I'm looking at it now and we had pretty low volume there. But when we get that 5 minute close above, and it looked pretty strong, right? That lower wick, that close near the top of the candle. I had a tight stop here and I got stopped out by pretty much half a point. I think my stop was 507.5, so somewhere in here. And we pretty much topped out around 5,108. So unfortunate, I got stopped out by about half a point and then we got that rejection. So what was my target? My target was, and I took 2 contracts here. So my target was yesterday's low day. And why would that be? Because you can see, from this rejection, we made our way all the way down there before we bounced. From this rejection, made our way all the way down there before we bounced. From this rejection, made our way all the way down there before we bounced. So I was just looking for a continuation, and that did work. It did work really well. Like I said, also, you see that volume come in. We had Jerome Powell speaking at this time. He started speaking at 11:15, so I gave it a couple minutes. Once it didn't look like things were really reacting too strongly, I felt confident to enter here. I also had a tight stop loss, which made me feel confident. If things really started to rip, it would have stopped me out. Too tight, though. Too tight of a stop loss here. And I think that was due to having 2 losing trades prior. I didn't want to have a big third losing trade. But I should have had more conviction. This was a winning trade. I should have just given it a little bit more room to play out. And we had a huge drop, right? That was massive. So I'm not going to lie, when I got stopped out and then it immediately dropped, I had a bit of FOMO there. Those are always the worst trades, the ones that work out, but you get stopped right before they work. So that's on me, though. That's on me for sure. Could have given it a little bit extra room to let that trade work. And this is something that I'm trying to balance, is having a tight stop loss, but also giving my trades enough room to actually play out, right? You can't be too tight or else you'll get stopped out before the move happens. That happens a lot. So that was my third trade. So to this day, or to this point, 3 losing trades. I was down a decent amount on the day. But nonetheless, none of these losses were very big. None of these losses were very big at all. This leads me to my 4th and final trade, and that is on NQ. I'm not going to get into the zones too much on NQ. We kind of had a similar thing, right? We had a big drop yesterday, then we started to form a range. NQ is trading within this range as well, right? We bounced off here. The one trade that I was looking for was a rejection on NQ up in this area because we had this double top pre-market high, and then we had this resistance as well. This happened really quick, so I didn't take this initial move. We looked pretty strong and then reversed on the 1 minute. I can show that in a second. But then we came up and got the retest, and I was actually looking for shorts on the retest, but the retest happened extremely fast. It pushed up and immediately pushed down. I wasn't quick enough to get filled. I wasn't quick enough to even enter a position. and then we got that really nice rejection. So this was the one trade that I was actually looking for today, and I probably should stick to that plan a little bit better, right? That's something I was watching. It's something that played out really, really, really well. Instead, I ended up taking some sillier trades that maybe weren't part of my plan, that weren't really up to what I was looking for. But my my fourth and final trade on the day was on NQ. So similar to ES, how we had a downward trend line, right, a resistance, I drew this support trend line on NQ. When ES got that big rejection, we got this break of that trend line on NQ. When we came up and retested, I entered a short position. There was a ton of volatility here, so this was not a great trade. I'm going to break it down to the 1 minute so we can take a better look at this. I entered, and well, I got kind of lucky here. I entered on the 17,900 level, so I entered right here at the top of this wick. When we came down, I exited. So it was about a 15-point move or so, and I entered 2 contracts. So 15 points, about $30 each contract, about $60. This made up the majority of my trade, my losses. I was down about 70 or so. I did not stay in this trade because I didn't like the volatility that I was seeing. We had this massive move down, then we got a massive bounce up as we retested this area. I entered a short position. As soon as we started to pull back, I exited. I did not feel very comfortable because things were moving really, really fast. I could have held a little bit longer, but this would have stopped me out. I had about a 10-point stop loss, so this would have stopped me out right here. This was an instance where I didn't feel comfortable. I sized up, and I probably shouldn't have. NQ trades crazy, 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 crazy. I think from now on, as I'm getting used to trading NQ, I'll remain at 1 contract because the fluctuations are pretty crazy, and I didn't feel super comfortable just watching how fast things were moving back and forth. So got a quick 15-point scalp on 2 contracts, made up almost all my losses for the day, and called it right there. I had about a $12 loss on the day after, so I guess I had about $72 or so in loss, made about 60 on this quick move here, and just called it. I didn't want to keep gambling. I don't want to overtrade, and I knew that the more trades I took, I'd probably dig myself into a hole, right? So I did like the retest this trend line, but you can see things aren't, you have to have some room for error on NQ because it will swing 30, 20 points in a matter of seconds. So not the cleanest. You see that we pushed up quite a bit higher, and then we got that rejection back down to this, yesterday's low. I was hoping for something more like that, but like I said, I didn't feel super comfortable holding on to this with how strong and how fast of a bounce that we got. All in all, though, this one trade was able to almost make up for all 3 of my trades on ES, and that was using a little bit more size on both ES and NQ. So going to size down on NQ trades in the future until I feel a bit more comfortable. Once we have some of this volatility, I think like earlier in the day, some of these moves you could have had a 10-point stop. I usually like to use 10 points as my stop for NQ. If I can get a good entry, that's generally sufficient. But yeah, it can be a wild ride. So that's something that I'll need to continue to kind of learn how that trades. I do feel more comfortable at this moment trading ES. But that's all I got for you. Not the greatest trading day from me, but we were able to keep it a really small red day overall, so it's very manageable. I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll be trading live throughout the rest of this week. See if we can't bring it back and have another green day. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.